Okay, here's this week's tale. A couple days ago, I finally got around to watching that movie, The Blind Side. And if you haven't seen this movie or haven't heard about it, it's about a family that takes in a kid who's a total stranger, and they basically raise him as their own. And he ends up, the reason why the movie is so popular is because he ends up going to be a big football star. And, you know, I thought that was great because my own family's done stuff like that too. Although nobody ever ended up rich and famous. I thought I'd talk about it this week because I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that my grandparents, I actually have 4 sets of grandparents. So I thought I would explain that a little. I'm going to talk about my dad's side of the family this time, and it's about how I have 2 sets of grandparents on my dad's side of the family. Oh, I should point out the thing about taking people in is something that bunches of my family members have done. My Aunt Rose has taken at least a dozen kids. Most of them were related to us in that they were other cousins or stuff that for whatever reason their parents couldn't raise them, so my aunt did. She could never have kids of her own, so it kind of fulfilled it. But at least in a couple cases, 2 of the kids she raised were absolute strangers. In one case, the kid was literally abandoned by my aunt at the time's next door neighbor. They just packed up and left the kid behind, and my aunt and uncle Ray ended up the kid's parents. If you look on my pictures on my tag page, you see a picture of my Aunt Debbie and my Uncle Milt. My Uncle Milt passed away a couple of months ago, and at his funeral there were more than 20 people there that called my aunt and uncle Mom and Dad because they lived with him and they raised him, and they were just essentially strangers. Recently, my niece, there's a picture of my 2 nieces on my webpage, and one of them is actually no relation to us. She was a girl that worked at a coffee shop that my niece worked at. Apparently, her parents had a falling out, and she had no place else to go. So my niece said, well, you know, come on, you can come live with us. And she talked with, you know, my niece talked with my sister about it, and she talked to the girl and said, yeah, okay, fine. And she moved in, and she became a niece. Subsequently, she found a guy, and they moved out, and they've set up a house together because, you know, time goes by and you grow up. Anyway, I was going to tell you about my dad's part of the family and why I have 4 sets of grandparents, 2 on my dad's side of the family. My grandparents, my grandfather, he saw the Depression coming in this country, and he was already a legal U.S. citizen, so was my grandmother, but they saw that the economy here was going bad, so they sold all their assets, and they moved to Mexico, and they opened a little convenience store, like a corner store. And there was a woman who used to come every day and buy little bits of this and that, and she had like 13 kids. Now my grandmother had 2 children, but they died really young, and she couldn't have any more. And the woman with the 13 kids was my dad's biological mom. Child number 13, my dad was child number 12, died from essentially malnutrition, and my dad was headed that way. And my grandmother felt so bad for this that she talked to this woman, and they legally adopted my dad. And when the Depression was over, my grandparents came back to this country, and by then my dad became a naturalized citizen. So the grandparents that I lived with, or that lived with us until their end, basically were no relation to me at all. Now, we still have contact with my dad's biological parents because when we were younger, we just go down to Mexico all the time to visit them. So I've got lots of uncles and aunts and cousins in Mexico, and my dad's got, you know, that's my dad's actual biological parents, so we kept in contact with them this whole time. And then my grandparents that lived with us, Grandma and Grandpa, the ones I always think of most as Grandma and Grandpa, were actually no relation to us at all. I think kind of the point of this story is that you don't usually get to pick your family members, but it doesn't mean you can't pick them. Basically, anybody that you include into your family and becomes part of your family and you think of them your family is your family. Anyway, that's this week's tale. Remember, the world's a better place when we all share, and I hope you all have a great weekend.